Welcome back to Educator.com's English Grammar course. This lesson is about adjectives. Let's get started. Okay, in this lesson, we're going to go over adjectives, what they are, how to use them. We're going to start with what is an adjective, find out exactly what they do, how they work. We'll talk about different kinds of adjectives. There are adjectives that describe, adjectives that count, and adjectives that specify. We're going to talk about how pretty much anything in the English language can function as an adjective and how to spot them. We'll talk about how to tell adjectives apart from adverbs. We'll talk about how to use adjectives with linking verbs. And finally, we'll look over a couple of tricks to make sure that we're using adjectives correctly and grammatically. All right, what is an adjective? An adjective is pretty much any word that modifies a noun or a pronoun. There are a couple of exceptions, but generally, if it's modifying one of those, it's an adjective. In English, adjectives usually come directly before the noun or pronoun that they're modifying, or they follow a linking verb, which you may remember from our lesson on verbs. Okay, adjectives may describe what kind of noun or pronoun we're talking about, how many of them there are, or which one is being discussed. Adjectives are important because they add detail, specificity, and color to writing in English. They make writing come alive. Without adjectives, English would be very boring. All right, let's start with adjectives that describe. An adjective that describes may describe any characteristic of the noun or pronoun that it's talking about. It may talk about shape or color, size, texture, sound, temperature, mood, where it comes from, anything. Let's look at some examples. The bird's sweet song woke me up. In this case, sweet is the adjective, and it's describing song, which is a noun. It's describing the sound of the song. It had a very sweet sound. You can tell it's an adjective because it comes directly before a noun, song, and because it describes an aspect of it. All right. Marcus drives a big red truck. Both big and red describe truck. And you notice that we can stack adjectives up in English. Sometimes they're separated by a comma, not always, but you can stack up several adjectives in front of a noun and they will all modify whatever noun comes right after them. All right, I touched the cool surface, describing the temperature of the surface, of the smooth marble statue. Smooth and marble both describe statue. Smooth describes the texture, and marble describes its composition, what it's made of. All right, then we have the angry cat. Well, that describes an emotional state of being. Shrieked as its irritated owner. I think anybody who had an angry cat would be irritated, especially if it were shrieking. Sprayed it with cold water, and that describes the temperature of the water. So as you see, adjectives that describe are actually pretty easy to pick out. All right, let's look at adjectives that count. A lot of people forget that numbers can also be adjectives, and so can non-specific counting words like several. How many birds sat in the tree? Several birds. I'm about to tell you something that few people know. Few describes people, and it tells you how many people know this thing. All right, here's one that's more specific. Knock 3 times, and I'll let you in. This describes the number of times. It modifies the noun. It's an adjective. And the bowl broke into 2 pieces. 2 is an adjective modifying pieces. It tells you how many. All right, adjectives that specify. We covered this a little bit in pronouns, but now we're going to cover it from the adjective perspective. Adjectives that specify point out particular nouns or pronouns. This, that, these, those, and so on. Adjectives that specify, like pronouns that specify, are demonstrative pronouns, are basically the words where you point. That tree is taller than the others. That tree, right there. What should I do with these cookies? These cookies. Watch those monkeys, or they'll steal your lunch. And this milk has gone sour. Now, as we discussed in the pronouns lesson, the way to tell a demonstrative pronoun apart from an adjective that specifies is that an adjective is always followed by a noun or a pronoun. If it's not, you're dealing with a pronoun. If it has a noun after it, it's an adjective. All right. Here is the real problem with adjectives. Anything can be one at some point in a sentence. Any word that modifies a noun or pronoun, with very few exceptions, is an adjective, even if it is normally a different part of speech. So, there goes a police car. Now, police in English is normally a noun. You say, I'm going to call the police. It's a noun. It's an organization. But when it modifies car, it's describing the purpose of the car, and it becomes an adjective. It's a police car. That's what kind of car it is. Raoul works in a plant nursery. Well, plant can be a noun or a verb in English. Planting something in the ground, or the plant is the thing that grows. But in this case, it modifies nursery and tells you what kind of nursery we're talking about. I would like a piece of chocolate cake. Again, this could be a noun, but because it is immediately followed by cake, and because it modifies cake, it's an adjective. And finally, I recycle soda bottles. Soda is another noun that in this case is working as an adjective because it modifies bottles. All right, let's do some exercises. Take a look at these sentences and see whether you can figure out whether we're talking about adjectives or nouns. Each of these sentences is part of a pair. In one sentence in the pair, a certain word is acting as an adjective. In the other sentence, that same word is acting as a noun. Take a look at the sentences and see if you can figure out which is which. Hand me that book on the table. I belong to a book club. This dog food smells awful. My dog is a fast runner. You must always take care of your health. And I can't stand health food. Take a good look, pause the video if you need to, and let's move on. All right, there we are. Hand me that book on the table. Well, in this case, book is acting like a noun. We're talking about an actual book. It refers to an object. It's a noun. In fact, it's even modified by the adjective that. I belong to a book club. Well, in this case, book is an adjective because it's modifying club. This dog food smells awful. Dog is modifying food. It tells you what kind of food we're talking about. But in the case of my dog is a fast runner, well, then we're talking about an actual animal, so it's a noun. You must always take care of your health. Well, that can't be an adjective because it's not on the other side of a linking verb and it doesn't have a noun following it. You're actually talking about your state of health. And finally, I can't stand health food. Once again, health is modifying food, so it becomes an adjective. All right, adjectives versus adverbs. Adjectives always, always, always modify nouns or pronouns. That is what they do. So if you're trying to tell an adjective from an adverb, look to see if it's modifying a noun or a pronoun. In this case, the teddy bear sat on a high shelf. High modifies shelf, therefore it's an adjective. Adverbs, however, they modify verbs, adjectives, and other adverbs. We'll cover them in detail in a later lesson, but for right now, all you need to know is they modify these other parts of speech, and they very often end in ly. That's often a tip-off that you're dealing with an adverb. So in this case, the police dog has been highly trained. That is an adverb. It modifies trained, or rather has been trained, which is a verb phrase. It's modifying a verb, so it's an adverb. All right, here we have some more paired sentences. In each pair, one sentence is using a particular word as an adjective, and the other sentence is using a particular word as an adverb. Take a look and see if you can tell the difference. I am very tired. That's the very shirt I mean. Your view on this issue is extreme. It is extremely cold out here. Talk is cheap. And I can sell you this car quite cheaply. Take a look, think about it, pause the video if you need to, and let's move on. I am very tired. All right, in this case, the only adjective in that sentence is tired. Very is an adverb modifying tired. It's modifying an adjective, so it has to be an adverb. All right, but here we have, that's the very shirt I mean. Very in this case is an adjective. We're using it in the sense of specific or exact. That is the exact shirt I mean. It modifies shirt, which is a noun, which makes it an adjective. Your view on this issue, okay, that's a specifying adjective. It modifies issue, is extreme. Actually, extreme modifies view, pardon. However, it is extremely cold out here. In this case, cold is the only adjective we're dealing with. Extremely is an adverb modifying cold. How cold? Extremely cold. Talk is cheap. Modifies talk, therefore it's an adjective. And I can sell you this car, this modifies car, quite cheaply. Well, cheaply in this case is an adverb, and it's modifying sell. How can I sell you this car? Cheaply. So here's how you tell adjectives from adverbs. Remember, if it modifies a noun or a pronoun, it's an adjective. If it modifies a verb, an adjective, or an adverb, it's an adverb. Okay, let's look at linking verbs. Now, we're going to cover linking verbs in more detail in our unit on verbs later in the course. But for right now, all you need to remember is that a linking verb is a verb that can be replaced with an equal sign. Linking verbs link subjects with subject complements. Basically, they say that the subject is equivalent to whatever's on the other side of the verb. Sometimes that complement is an adjective. Let's look at some examples. The pirate was terrible and fierce. Pirate equals terrible. We're basically saying there's an equivalency there. So both terrible and fierce modify pirate. In the dark, the dog's growl sounded louder. Once again, the growls were louder. Louder modifies growls. It's an adjective. And you are so patient with your children. Patient modifies you. And that accusation is outrageous. Outrageous modifies accusation. Note that when you see linking verbs, very often they're forms of the verb to be, like was, or are, or is. That's a hint that you're dealing with a linking verb and that you're probably dealing with a subject complement. It might be an adjective. All right, let's look at how to use adjectives correctly. Adjectives, as I've said several times in this lesson, must always modify nouns or pronouns. Never use an adjective to modify a verb, an adjective, or an adverb. I hear this sentence all the time. It drives me crazy. I did good on the test. Wrong, incorrect. Do not say this. It makes you sound dumb. It is correct to say, I did well on the test, because well is an adverb modifying did. How did I do? I did well. Adverb. Well is an adverb. Good is an adjective. It is also correct to say that I got a good grade on the test, because in this case, good is an adjective modifying the noun grade. Either one of those is correct. Never ever say, I did good on something. All right, here's another one that I hear. I'm selling sandwiches cheap. We often say that we're selling something cheap in English, especially American English. It is incorrect. It is correct to say, I'm selling cheap sandwiches, using cheap as an adjective to modify the noun sandwiches, or to say, I'm selling sandwiches cheaply. Cheaply is an adverb modifying selling. How am I selling? I'm selling cheaply. So, depending on what you're actually describing, are you describing the sandwiches or how you're selling them, you should either use an adjective or an adverb. Never mix the two up. Okay, let's do an exercise. See if you can find the adjectives in this passage. Neil Armstrong was the first human being to set foot on the moon, but that wasn't his only first. After he finished his historic mission and climbed back into his moonlander, he accidentally broke the ignition switch for the ascent engine. Luckily, he was clever enough to use the aluminum casing of his pen to repair the broken wires. Neil Armstrong was the first man to hotwire a space vehicle, which happens to be a true story. All right, take a look at the passage. See if you can find the adjectives. Ready? There they are. Neil Armstrong was the first human, two adjectives modifying being, down on the next line, to set foot on the moon, but that wasn't his only first. Notice how first is an adjective up at the top, but it's a noun here, modified by the adjective only. Always check to see what role a word is playing in the sentence before you decide what part of speech it is. After he finished his historic mission, historic is an adjective modifying mission. What kind of mission? A historic one. He climbed back into his moon lander. Notice again, moon was a noun up here, but it's an adjective down here because it's modifying lander. He accidentally broke the ignition switch. Ignition, another noun that's acting like an adjective in this case because it's modifying the noun switch. For the ascent engine, luckily he was clever enough. Oh, here's a linking verb. So clever actually goes back to modify the pronoun he. He was clever enough to use the aluminum casing. What kind of casing? An aluminum one. Of his pen to repair the broken. What kind of wires? Broken wires. Neil Armstrong was the first, oh, there's first used as an adjective again, man to hotwire a space modifying vehicle. All right, let's do one more round of practice. This is the opening passage of J.R.R. Tolkien's novel, The Hobbit. Take a good look at it and see if you can find the adjectives he uses to describe the setting of the story. In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit. Not a nasty, dirty, wet hole filled with the ends of worms and an oozy smell, nor yet a dry, bare, sandy hole with nothing in it to sit down on or to eat. It was a hobbit hole, and that means comfort. It had a perfectly round door like a porthole, painted green, with a shiny yellow brass knob in the exact middle. Now, there's quite a few adjectives in there. Take a good look, see if you can find them. Ready? There they are. In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit, not a nasty, dirty, wet hole. Remember what I said about stacking up adjectives in English? This is a great example. Filled with the ends of worms and an oozy smell. Nor yet a, oh, here's more stacked adjectives, dry, bare, sandy hole. With nothing in it to sit down on or to eat. It was a hobbit hole, and that means comfort. Notice that that, in this case, is not an adjective. It's acting as a pronoun, a demonstrative pronoun. That means comfort. It had a perfectly round door. What kind of door? A round door, like a porthole. Painted green. In this case, linking verb. Painted is the linking verb, and green goes back to door. With a shiny, yellow, brass knob. Once again, stacked up adjectives, all modifying one noun. A knob in the exact middle. So as you can see, these adjectives add a lot of color and a lot of life to the story. They make the place he's describing come alive. That's the main purpose of adjectives in English. And now that you've learned how to identify them, I think we're done with the lesson. Thank you for watching Educator.com.